welcome back to the Bitcoin Layer. I'm Nick Bhatia, and today we welcome back Noelyne Sumba. Noelyne is our TBL Africa correspondent. That means she's on the continent and giving us regular updates on what's going on with Bitcoin adoption in Africa. Now, Noelyne is in Kenya. That is her country of origin, but she is making sure that she travels around the continent, at least with her relationships, so that she's bringing us the best research and a lot of important information for what's going on in Africa. Noelyne, thank you for coming back on the show.
Thank you for having me back, Nick. It's always a pleasure to be on the Bitcoin Layer.
Okay, excellent. Noelyne, so today we are going to start in Nigeria. Yep. First of all, there's a large Bitcoin adoption statistic when it comes to Nigeria, as well as a large stablecoin adoption. So Nigeria is already a hotspot for digital currency, but the situation, we believe, is accelerating. So what's going on in Nigeria with inflation? Talk about the potential strikes with the NLC and the TUC in Nigeria, and explain to us the political situation with regard to inflation to set the backdrop.
Okay, so Nick, as per now, there's a really critical situation in Nigeria. As we can see, around July, the Naira really depreciated sharply. And we have two of the biggest workers' union, as you've mentioned them, that want to strike. They are actually putting on an indefinite strike as from October 3rd. So for such a country to do this, the impact, especially in terms of the transport, food, and electricity, for a country that depends on petrol generators for electricity, it's going to be a huge challenge. So we see that Tinubu, the president of Nigeria, has decided to uphold the reforms that he had put into the country, that is the elimination of the subsidies and the relaxation of foreign exchange. And this has led to the workers' union demanding that the government should be able to listen to their plea. Things are getting expensive. Inflation it's unbearable in the country. And one thing that he's maintaining is that his actions will result in short-term difficulties in the country, but it will be essential in attracting investments for the government in the long run. So we're sort of wondering what's the middle ground here. So maybe for now we can just see the happenings next week. I don't know whether negotiations with the government will be able to change most of the decisions, but you're looking at a country that has had an 18-year high inflation. The inflation currently is in the double digits, around 25%, and removal of fuel subsidy is going to be really impactful. And it's once again, I keep on saying strange that Nigeria is a member of OPEC, and but it lacks the refining capacity, and it's forced to import most of its fuel requirements. And this is something that it's definitely going to be mostly a negative impact for the country. So the most we can see for now is just wait and see whether negotiations will be able to stop the strike. But if the strike does happen to occur, we expect that inflation will shoot up even more in the country.
The Bitcoin Layer is proud to be sponsored by River. Go check them out today at river.com/TBL. Why do we love River? River is a Bitcoin-only exchange. They offer Lightning Network deposits and withdrawals. And most importantly, guys, they do not outsource custody of their Bitcoin and customers' Bitcoin to a third-party custodian. River has its own multi-sig custody solution. That means that it is not using some other company to store Bitcoin that is purchased within their platform. So make sure you go check them out, river.com/TBL, and learn about River today. And so let's break this down for the audience here so that they understand really the basic economics of what's going on in Nigeria. You can actually forget the specific country for a second here as we explain what happens if a country's government provides fuel subsidies for its people
Yes.
because a vast majority of electricity generation in the country is dependent on just oil products, gasoline type of
Yes.
products, right? So you
Yes.
have petrol subsidies for the people because they need help paying for their electricity. They aren't able to refine the oil that they produce in the
Yes.
country, right? So they have to send the oil out and then import it back. They're importing it back at market prices, but the prices are in dollars. And so if the currency is under attack, either by its own government or some speculative attack from London banks, it doesn't even matter. What happens is that prices just continue to ratchet up for anything that's imported because it's all going to be dollar priced. So,
Yeah.
with the removal of subsidies, what you're doing is you're basically telling the people, we're not going to assist you in the primary way, and
Mhm.
we are not doing anything to protect the currency. Therefore, your inflation is guaranteed to be more. So that's
Yeah.
what I read is what's going on in Nigeria.
Yes, exactly. And maybe even I can give an example of my own country, Kenya. We had removal of the subsidy. A few months back, we had demonstrations. There was public outcry because of the removal of the subsidy. And with this, the government has now been forced to reintroduce the subsidies. Same case, the government was saying, we're doing this because it's for the economic benefit in the long run. So these are just short-term difficulties we would have to face, and then in the long run, we'll be able to figure out a way. But it was unsustainable because goods are becoming very, very expensive, especially in terms of food and transportation. And for us, we are an import-based economy. We depend on a lot of imports. So the shilling continued to slide, and yet the subsidies have been removed. Intervention had to be put in place to reintroduce the subsidies. So this is exactly the same case that's happening in Nigeria. And for Nigeria, there's already pressure on the naira. So removal of the subsidy is just going to further affect livelihoods in the country, just as you've mentioned, Nick.
So now tie that into what is going on in the country with regard to both stablecoin adoption and Bitcoin adoption. We know that the eNaira project hasn't really taken off, but Tether and Bitcoin are both very popular in Nigeria. So just bring the audience up to speed. What's going on with digital currency today in Nigeria?
Okay, so we had earlier talked maybe in one of our discussions on how the introduction of the CBDC or the introduction of the CBDC in Nigeria had been implemented. We had already said how when it was being implemented, somebody had not done their due diligence because the similar company had reintroduced something in Barbados that failed, and now with the implementation of the CBDC, we ended up having a black market in Nigeria, such that there was around four currencies in circulation. We had the old naira, the new naira, the e-naira, and now the black market trade. So it was just a cocktail that was not really suitable. And actually, what had been said was that it will be upheld until December 2023 this year, where the court was supposed to decide. But because there's a dire need for currency, the the country decided most of the citizens in the country just do not want to use it. They prefer just having their own naira, the old naira, which was easy to access, and the new naira that had even been printed was not enough. And so, adding on top of that, the new currencies are not enough, and now the e-naira that has been introduced cannot be accessed by majority of the population. We have a country that majority of the population will be left out of the financial sector, and this is the problem. And people will always seek a solution, and the solution currently that's working for majority of the population. They're seeking alternatives in terms of USDT and other stable coins like also USDC. They've been in circulation very much in the country. So you find Nigeria has a very big adoption in terms of Bitcoin, also, and mostly, but stablecoins definitely are still is still in the lead, because that's what's being used. In fact, even in most of the importation that's occurring in the country, we find that people are preferring to use stablecoins for the payment. So we see that with the seeking of alternatives, I think adoption is definitely going to just increase. Maybe we'll see this week, if the strike does go through and we have the naira devaluing even further. We'll definitely see an increase in the use of other alternative currencies, but mostly just stable coins and Bitcoin.
Now, Noelyne, the people might be a little confused as to why Tether and USDC versus Bitcoin. But
Yeah,
what I think the most obvious thing here is that the Naira, whatever form it's in, whether it's one of these four forms that you describe,
yeah.
is a currency that you don't want to own. You don't want to hold it
You don't want to hold it.
on a nightly basis, because every day that goes by, it's likely to lose its purchasing power in a material way, not in an immaterial way that's not noticeable until you go a couple years, but actually on a daily and weekly basis. So it makes sense that they're going to seek alternate currencies. But why? Just explain to people why dollar stablecoins versus Bitcoin. Now, you mentioned both are being adopted, both are being used in the country, but imports, for example, are being paid for in Tether,
Yeah,
right? Not in Bitcoin. And on a hand to hand basis, there's more usage of Tether than there
yeah,
is of Bitcoin. So
yeah.
just tell people in the Western world why that's the case. Why do people in Africa, in Nigeria specifically, use a US dollar stablecoin over Bitcoin, even though both are rising in their usage?
Okay, so there is a dire need. There is a dire need to have these currencies because for you, for Tether, that is, Bitcoin can be volatile, and so it hasn't really been accepted as the main form of payment. But US Tether is easily accessible for most of the population. There's a lot of trading that is ongoing in terms of the peer-to-peer platforms, especially. So it's the most accessible as per now. So for necessity purpose, I it's just it's much more convenient to be able to access Tether, and if your supplier accepts Tether in payment, then that is the go-to.
Absolutely. So it is then understandable that because the dollar is the world reserve currency, it's the currency that denominates most of the trade around the world, that a digital form of the dollar would be a very convenient thing for businesses in Nigeria to use. Now,
Yes.
go to the other side of the coin. What is it about Bitcoin that is achieving adoption in Nigeria? What do the Nigerian people identify with Bitcoin? We've talked about a little bit of the technology forward culture of Nigeria, just being on the forefront in terms of trend setting on the continent. But go one step further. Why is Bitcoin being adopted if Tether is such a great solution for everything?
I guess maybe just because of the long term, being able to save long term. People do understand the importance of Bitcoin, and the dollar manipulation is still there. And as people get to understand more, I can say that majority of the population is going for the dollar. I wouldn't even say they're going for USDT. The lower class will prefer to first of all get to the dollar, and if you understand the importance of USDT, especially for cross-border remittance, then USDT is the next best option. But for Bitcoin, if you want to save save your long term in terms of currency devaluation, then that's the option that people would go to. Majority of the population would go to.
And so it does come down to Bitcoin as a savings technology
Yes.
versus Bitcoin as a payments technology. We
Yes.
know that it is both, but
Mm.
it doesn't have to be both for every person on the planet or every use case. And so, right now, in terms of payment technology, Tether is winning in Nigeria. In
Tether
terms
is
of a
winning.
savings technology, Bitcoin is winning. And there are different use cases just based off of the circumstances of the person, the family, the country, even maybe the geography, the geopolitical dynamics between countries. There are many drivers that can drive people toward Bitcoin or toward Tether outside of the United States. But just remember, we have to remember that everybody has their own need. You mentioned that there's a dire need for digital dollars in
There is a
Nigeria.
dire need. Yes, not just
Yeah,
Nigeria. Same case in Kenya. I can say that there is a dire need for digital dollar. As you've mentioned, currencies are devaluing by the day at this point. For us, I can say we are currently at 25%, the devaluation, um, and inflation is rising on the daily basis. So there is a dire need for the digital dollar.
today's video is sponsored by Foundation Devices. Use promo code BitcoinLayer to pick up your passport today. Now go check out this device. The passport is a great way to get your Bitcoin off of exchanges. We all know the risks out there with keeping your coins on a third party custodian. Get them into your own custody today with a passport and use Bitcoin Layer as your promo code for $10 off. And then we would expect the boom in US dollar based stablecoins to continue,
Yes,
especially outside of the United States. This is not
yes.
a localized issue to
Mhm.
Africa, even. We
No.
see this around the world. It is also a parallel to the Eurodollar system. When we bring in monetary history, there's a parallel to offshore dollars that is very strong. Caitlin Long and I did an episode about why stablecoins are basically the new Eurodollar system. There is a dire need for dollars outside of the US to
Yes,
make the system work just because of the denomination network effects of the dollar. And people have to understand that Bitcoin is up against that dynamic when it comes to the savings technology aspect as well as the payments technology aspect.
yes.
Noelyne, thank you for bringing us up to speed in Nigeria. Now, I want to move over to the French countries, the French colonial um, ramifications and what we see in countries in Africa that use the CFA. So start absolutely at the beginning. How many countries, if you can give us an idea, how many countries in Africa have a legacy of French colonialism? First of
Okay.
all, the names of some of those countries, if you can. What is the CFA, Frank? What role is that? What role does France have in it? And just give us a quick, maybe 3 to 5 minute overview of the CFA, Frank, please.
Okay, so as per now, it's 14 countries. So for the CFA franc, maybe if I can explain, this is a common currency used by 14 countries in Western Central Africa, and it is pegged to the euro at a fixed exchange rate. So since the CFA franc is directly linked to the value of the euro, this gives France a significant degree of control over these 14 countries. Maybe one of the countries that I can mention that recently came into the limelight was Niger. Um, me, okay, when the CFA franc was introduced, it's actually managed by two central banks that are in France. So this also means that France has a significant monetary control over these 14 countries. And it's now more of we're talking about neocolonialism because these countries have not been given the sovereignty of determining how they will be able to use their currency or even just using their own currencies like most other African countries do. So I can maybe mention one of the countries, Mali. Mali came into the limelight maybe a few years back. when they had a coup themselves. So it maybe can say it was one of the countries that ushered a resistance to the CFA franc. Many other countries have been also doing that. We have Niger, we have Gabon, we have Burkina Faso, and we can say that the France control over these countries, it's putting them in a position where the economy is dependent mostly on keeping a significant portion of their foreign reserves in a special account that's in France, meaning that France has a large access to a pool of this foreign currency that is now used to support their own economy. So we're seeing that these countries are losing out, especially in terms of being sovereign and making their own economic decisions. And some people may argue that, because they use the CFA franc, they have the chance of having a stable currency, and they can be able to access the French market. But really, from what we can see, that it kind of stifles the economic growth and development in these regions. And they're fighting back. And we can see Mali was the first one to usher them in the fighting, as I've mentioned. And then we have like Niger recently had a coup in July that was in an attempt to, try and maybe have negotiations in terms of the use of the CFA franc. And we see that when there was the elected president was just arrested in the coup. um, but yeah, but besides Niger, we have also Gabon recently. The president was declared, the incumbent president was declared again. This is a country, of course, that has had like 5 decades of the same presidential rule. So it's mostly the same family ruling. And they were re-electing the president for a third term. This was the Bongo family, and there was a coup in terms of that, because they feel like France is now influencing. They're putting in puppets that are now controlling the situation. So people really do not have a say. And but the fighting back, I feel, is as a result of trying to free themselves from this, trying to be sovereign, trying to have their own sovereign currency. Yeah.
So, still a degree of French colonialism going on with regard to economic control, control over the currency, control over trade, control over the location of the reserves, and all of those things contributing to political unrest. So, uh, explain to us the relationship between inflation and the coups in the
Okay.
CFA franc countries. What's going on with inflation specifically that is being cited by the political opposition?
Okay, so as I've said, when the countries are using their CFA franc in terms of the inflation, for example, when Burkina Faso had the coup, it definitely causes instability in the country, and with this instability, the economy weakens. There's also cases of human rights abuses going on. Definitely, things become expensive in the country, and this is just a repeat. Same case with Gabon, same case with Mali. So we're seeing a scenario in which these countries are still undergoing, there's fighting for the freedom, but at the same time, the economy is weakening in the process of doing this. Um, for now, I really don't have the exact inflation figures for the countries, but it definitely is there. It definitely is there, because wherever there is instability, the movement of goods and services become a problem, and yeah, things are bound to become more expensive in this
Uh,
country.
Noelyne, for my last question, I want to ask you, maybe you can bring it back to Nigeria or go
Yeah,
somewhere
yeah,
else with it.
yes.
You mentioned how what's going on in Nigeria is a big problem.
Yes.
That it's getting worse, and it's something that we should absolutely be watching. You
Yes.
also mentioned that there are coups in several countries going
Yes.
on right now in response to what's going on with the CFA franc and
Yes.
uh, other issues to do with self sovereignty within the nation. So there are problems in currency devaluation, problems with politics, problems with French colonialism. What is the thing we have to watch most with regard to the African economy right now? Is it the Nigerian inflation problem, as Nigeria is, one of the main lifebloods of the African economy?
Okay, so maybe one thing we can be able to watch, especially for Nigeria, the Central Bank of Nigeria governor was recently just ousted by the president. I guess they are also in a situation where they're trying to figure out solutions for this. Proposition of use of Bitcoin and other stable coins in the country. I guess it's been an ongoing discussion, especially now with the failure of the e-naira. That has already been it's already out there that this cannot work. So maybe what we can look at is how the countries will be able to respond to this. They prefer to use the subsidy way. For us, like I can say in Kenya, we are receiving loans from the IMF and World Bank consistently. So as per now, Nick, I really am not sure how the level of decision making that will be done, especially by the central banks of either of these countries, because it seems it's all across the continent that currencies are devaluing at a very fast pace. So we can just be on the lookout. Each country is making their own decision. I can't even really base it just on Nigeria, because the situation in Nigeria is different as compared to Kenya, maybe as compared to Burkina Faso, as compared to South Africa. Yeah.
We need to be watching currency devaluation anywhere it appears.
Yes.
Noelyne Sumba, our correspondent in Africa with the Bitcoin layer. Noelyne, thank you so much as always for joining us and sharing what's going on the
Thank
continent.
you for having me, Nick.
All right. Talk to you again soon.
Okay, thank
The
you.
Bitcoin layer is sponsored by River. Go check them out today, river.com/TBL, for a Bitcoin only exchange and a great experience. River offers a DCA feature where you can stack sats without any fees. They offer Lightning Network withdrawals, so get your Bitcoin off of the exchange using Lightning Network instantly. And also, the most important thing about River, guys, they do not use a third-party custodian. They have a multi-sig storage solution so that your Bitcoin, once you purchase your Bitcoin using River, is not stored using a third-party custodian. River has control of that Bitcoin using a multi-signature solution. And what's more, they suggest you get your Bitcoin off of the exchange and into your own pockets. So go check out River today.